So, ladies and gentlemen, it's that easy. So, all right, we're done. Anyway, our seventh tradition states that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. We will now pass the basket. Thank you, Chris. This is a weekly literature or STEP meeting. Our format is as follows. A speaker is asked to talk for no longer than 30 minutes. He or she spends 15 minutes on qualifying themselves and the other 15 minutes on either a composition from the Big Book or the STEP of the week, followed by group shares, discussions, questions up until 7 p.m. We then end the meeting with either the Lord's Prayer or the Serenity Prayer, whatever this gentleman chooses from. You can find our past weekly meetings on the YouTube page at the Stay Alive Literature and Group meeting. You can also find information about our upcoming meetings and other great stuff on Doylestown Recovery Group Facebook. Don't forget to smash the like book, subscribe, and share. Are you ready?
Yep.
You good?
I'm good.
Okay. This brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting on this day of Monday, June 9th in Doylestown, PA at the Monday night 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and STEP Group meeting at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Steve, and he will be sharing his experience and speaking on something from the Big Book. Let's welcome Steve.
Thank you. I think most everybody in the room has already picked up on the fact that this is my first time speaking at a meeting. My name is Steve, and I am an alcoholic.
Steve.
So I can't say I'm really all that nervous right now. What I'm most nervous about is just being able to do a good job. So I have experience standing up in front of 300 or 400 people with my band guitar strapped around my neck doing lead vocals. So I got used to being in front of crowds, so it doesn't make me uncomfortable. But I'd like to start by doing something that I would have absolutely never considered doing 6 months ago, and you'll understand why when I get into my story. But for guidance and for inspiration, I'm just going to do a quick read of the third step prayer. So, God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always.
Amen. All right.
Thanks. That was kind of help me get started here. So I'm going to go through things chronologically. That made the most sense to me, and I've seen others do that as well. And I, by the way, I have notes. I am 62 years old, and there's no way on earth I could do what I've seen so many guys do: come up here, sit down, and talk for 25 minutes without looking at a note. I would never stand a chance. So bear with me while I do that. I was raised in a very average, middle-class, church-going family. I lived in a good neighborhood. I don't know if anybody knows where the town of Berwyn is in Chester County, western suburb of Philadelphia. My family went to church regularly. I had a lot of friends. Our street was filled with kids around my age. I also grew up in the middle of two other brothers. And there is no history of alcoholism in my family. I have the distinct honor of being the sole alcoholic in my what do you call it, nuclear family. So jumping forward from there, knowing that I was living a pretty average, normal life, around the age of 11, I was developing a self-esteem problem, and I still don't know why to this day. I'll work on that later. Trauma therapy will come after I've been sober for a while longer. But I realized that I became a validation junkie. So I'm an alcoholic first, but I also consider myself to be a validation addict. I think that goes goes closely together with my condition. At the age of 14, I had my first drunk. I was with a group of my friends from my street. We had built a fort in the woods behind the houses, and one of the guys got a mason jar and went through his dad's liquor cabinet and did a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And oh my God, that stuff was horrible. I later learned that, oh, well, that's called jungle juice. And so we all just passed the mason jar around, taking sips and sips. And about a half hour later, we went out for a walk. And I remember saying, oh, I'm not drunk, but I couldn't walk a straight line. I could not walk a straight line to save my life. So right away, my first drunk, and I was in denial. So that's how my first drunk started. A year later, at the age of 15, my mom and dad split up, which when I was 15 did not happen in my circle of friends. I felt like I was living in a soap opera. It was surreal. And the interesting thing is, it was my mom who moved out. And so me and my brothers were left at home with my dad. And I love my dad. He's an awesome guy. He was a great role model. And he tried his hardest to bring us up right. But he worked, so he worked until 5 or 6 o'clock. And so he wasn't around for a portion of time that I was at home when I got home from school. And so, and I didn't recognize the significance of my mom moving out until literally about 6 months ago, when a therapist looked at my timeline and said, have you ever been treated for this trauma of your mom abandoning you when you were 15? And I said, no, I never recognized that as the trauma of my mom abandoning me when I was 15. But now when I look back on it, I realize that had a significant impact on steering me in the direction that I have traveled. So much of my teen life, from the age of 15 on up, I lived without guardrails because my dad wasn't there to set them. So that didn't really seem to be a problem back then. But the problem was I learned to live without boundaries, and that much later became a big problem. In school, I was doing really, really well. Academically, I was doing well. In sports, I was having a blast. I was a gymnast, and I loved that sport. I was so passionate about it. But my success in gymnastics and my success academically came because of a lot of hard work that I was willing to put in. And in 10th grade, I actually joined a gymnastics center with a guy who became my best friend. And we used to work out 3 hours a night, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. So we were all in on it. And like I said, I loved it. It was a great passion of mine. And during the competitive gymnastics season, my grades actually went up because I had to be ultra disciplined, knowing that I was going to high school practice and then had to get my homework done, and then I was then going to the gymnastics center afterwards for like a 7 o'clock to 9:30 workout. I took a year off between high school and college, went to college at the age of 19, dropped out after my first year because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it was in that 1 year in college where I shifted from being an average Christian to an agnostic. I started questioning the existence of God. And so, like I said, about the age of 20, I became an agnostic. I dropped out, and that same best friend who was in gymnastics with me had landed a job at an IT firm, and he helped me get in the door in a very entry-level position. So I had no technical background, but I had a lot of drive, and he was able to convince his boss to hire me on. And that really became the launching pad for my IT career. And that same friend walked into my walked into the office where I was working one day and threw a programming manual on my desk, and he said, "Read that and learn how to program in that language." And I cracked the book open, went down to the data center, sat down there, and started writing a program to help me do my job. And pretty much every week I would grow that program into something more complex and more helpful for me. And eventually my supervisor heard that I had written this program that helped me do my job, and she said, "I'd like to see that." And she came down and took a look at it, and she said, "Wow, this is really good. Would you like to be a programmer?" And I was like, "Yeah," because I was I was chasing the money. So while I was at that company, when I was 22 years old, this is a drinking story, I had been asked to tutor the son of the senior vice president in the company who had recently gotten out of rehab for substance abuse. He was 19. And he and I had a drinking night together one night, and he was driving me back to my place. And in Chester County, if you were there in the 80s, they used to have signs by the highway and by some of the bigger roads that said, "Chester County, drunk drivers go to jail." So we were flying down the road one night, and he slams on the brakes, and he said, "We need that sign." And we pulled over, and he and I got our shoulders underneath. It was one of the smaller versions of the sign, because some of them were full billboard size. This one is only like 10 feet by 6 feet. And we got our shoulders on it, and we ripped it out of the ground, and we stuck the first 2 feet of it in the trunk of his car, and the other 8 feet of it were hanging out the back, and we drove back to my place and proceeded to put it in my house. So, yeah, just kind of give you, I mean, most people would think I'm a pretty nice guy, but man, I was a rebel. And that's just one example of me being rebellious. At the age of 24, I moved up to Bethlehem because I had been recruited by a company to work on the computer systems that I had learned really well. And started my IT career in Bethlehem. It was with that company for 23 years. And one thing worth noting is that my younger brother and I shared an apartment. I helped him get a job then at that company where I had been hired. My younger brother and I shared an apartment, and we kept a case of beer in the refrigerator. And between the two of us, that case of beer would last a week. So at the age of 24, I was definitely not drinking alcoholically. Not that I wasn't thinking that way. At the age of 27, I got married to my first wife. And after the first year, the relationship had already become very strained, unfortunately. And we were married for 9 years before my daughter was, actually almost 10 years. My daughter's was 3 weeks old when my first wife and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. But the relationship was truly strained. And for the last 6 years of that relationship, or at least the last 4 years of that relationship, I was sleeping in the guest bedroom of that house. And I'm kind of jumping out of order because by that point I was age 36 or 37. That's when I started drinking alcoholically. My wife and my daughter would go to bed in the master bedroom at around 9 o'clock, and I would stay up from 9 until 1 a.m. just drinking. So, but jumping back, when I was 30, my father passed away, and that happened very suddenly. He was living on Nantucket. He was working in his office doing taxes. It was April 13th, I believe, maybe the 14th, and it was probably around 10 o'clock at night, they think, and he had a massive heart attack, and the coroner said he never knew what happened. But what tore me up about that, one, that my father was only 58 when he died, but two, he was by himself when he died, and that just ate me up. But thank God I had no unfinished business with him. He knew I loved him. I knew he loved me, because if it had been in a different way, it would have probably been much more traumatic for me. It was traumatic enough. So, and the therapist said to me, "Did you ever get treated for that trauma? Because your dad left you, when you were 30." And I said, "No, didn't know about that one either." So again, I was about 37 when I started drinking alcoholically. At the age of 39, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is usually juvenile diabetes. But for some reason, my pancreas decided to stop making insulin, and suddenly I was a type 1 diabetic. So that was a big traumatic event in my life. When I was 41, I decided to end my first marriage. I didn't want my daughter to think that what she saw between me and her mom was a normal marriage. And I just said, I have to end this. I have to show her, I hoped to show her what a good marriage could look like. And then a year later, I met the woman who is now my wife, Vicki. I met her when I was 42, and 4 years later, I married her. And she is absolute proof that I am an overachiever, because that woman was way out of my league. And she is, to this very day, I would describe her as the most beautiful woman I have ever known, both physically and spiritually. How I convinced her to marry me, I don't know. It's a miracle. I was agnostic then, but there were still miracles happening in my life. When I met Vicki, I was drinking alcoholically, but I did a damn good job of hiding it. And so, there was certainly deception on my part that allowed Vicki to make the decision to marry me. It never occurred to me that I had a drinking problem, a real drinking problem, until around 2014. And so New Year's Eve 2015, I said, New Year's resolution, I'm going to stop drinking for 1 year. And it's exactly what I did. I went a whole year without drinking. I white-knuckled it. I had no program. I wasn't in touch with a higher power. I just white-knuckled it. Because I'm hard-headed too. And I was just like, no, I'm not drinking. I said I wasn't going to drink. I'm not drinking. And yeah, it was tough. It was really tough at times. But for the most part, it was okay. And at the end of that year, I said, okay, I must not be an alcoholic. So New Year's Eve 2016, I popped open a bottle of champagne, and before the night was over, I had drained a second bottle of champagne. And I was right back in the races, drinking alcoholically again. When I was 53, I moved into a new job, working for the third largest software company in the world, in a really good position in a company with incredible benefits. And again, blessed with that, but the hard work of my career was paying off. A year later, I was working from home full time. And this was even before COVID hit. And I'm an alcoholic, and I'm working from home full time. So you can only imagine what goes on there. And the company I work for is based out of Germany. So my meetings would generally run from 7 a.m. until 9 or 10 a.m. And then the rest of the day was mine. And and it wasn't pretty. So jumping forward, in 2021, I went to a rehab in Los Angeles for the first time, any rehab for the first time. And this rehab specialized in multiple addictions, alcohol being my primary addiction, a behavioral addiction as another. And when I got home from that place, I was sober for about a month, and I relapsed again. And my relapses were like roller coasters. I could go a couple days without drinking, but then then I'd binge. In 2024, end of 2024, my wife came into the office where I was working. I was drunk at the time. It was probably 10:30 in the morning, and she had it. And this was actually early December. She had it, and she said, "You need to go back to rehab." And on December 22nd, I went back to the same rehab center, and spent my first week in Los Angeles in a detox, and then spent the next few weeks in the rehab house and clinic. So now I'm 61, coming home from rehab. My wife said, "You're not living here." And thank God the therapist at the rehab center said, "You need to go to a sober living house because you cannot live anywhere else." And I was resistant at first, but then I bought in, and I was lucky enough to find, Junction House right here in Doylestown. So suddenly I was living in Doylestown. At the end of my stay at rehab, I started praying for the first time in 41 years. And amazingly, I saw some of my prayers getting answered. The rehab center had reached out to my wife while I was there and said, "Would you be willing to write an impact letter so that your husband understands how much you hurt him?" Or, he hurt you. And she said, "No, I refuse to do that." And I was the only of 7 guys who were in that house whose partner said no to the impact letter. So the writing on the wall was my marriage was truly over. But like I said, about a week or 2 later, I started saying prayers, and I needed to be in communication with my wife so that we could figure out the logistics of me coming home and what I was going to do. And every once in a while, she would say something that would give me just a shred of hope that maybe the relationship, maybe the marriage wasn't over. And so I saw prayers being answered quickly. And again, I was astounded. And I learned quickly that rigorous honesty is what really helped stabilize my sobriety. And the rehab center sent me home with a great aftercare plan, which they hadn't done 3 years earlier. The aftercare plan 3 years earlier was weak. This one was really strong, and I was following the program. One thing for me is I was looking for a sponsor, and an AA sponsor when I got here. And one thing I've learned about myself is it matters who tells you the message. I'm keeping an eye on my time, by the way. I guess I'll go about 4 before me. Okay, yeah. So just a quick story back to gymnastics. Pommel horse was my #1 event, and the core move that sets the foundation for elite level performance on the pommel horse is what's just called a circle. It's the thing where the guys go round and around and around. That's the circle. I could only do one, and I knew I needed to be able to do more than one in order to take my game to the next level. And one day in walks to the gym. This is at high school. A guy named Matt Baker. And Matt jumps up on the pommel horse, and he's going around and around and around. I don't think I'd ever witnessed somebody that close doing it. And he jumps down, and he said, "Hey, Steve, jump up there. Let me see what you can do." And I did 1. And I did, again, 1. And he said, Steve, you got to push down and extend. When you're going around, push down and extend. And I got up on the pommel horse, tried it, and I went, 2. The next time, 3. And my coach sees this from a distance, and he walks over and he says, "What the heck happened?" And I said, "Matt told me to push down and extend." And the coach smacked me in the side of the head. He said, "What have I been telling you for the last year? Push down and extend." He was true. He was telling me the exact same thing for the prior year. It never sunk in. I saw somebody who could do it tell me what to do, and it sunk in. And I feel like my search for a sponsor needed the same type of situation, where I went through a couple sponsors, and now I'm with a sponsor who I hear and I listen to, and I don't question him. I've been known for doing it my way, my own program, and I think that ties back to when I was 15 and had no boundaries, where I had to do it my way. So I'm coming into the home stretch here. One other story I want to tell real quick is just I had a roommate when I came into the sober living house in January. I had a roommate, and boy, he was like polar opposite of me. He laid in bed almost all day long, and he was on his phone all day long. He loved the stock market, and that's what he was looking at all day long. We were roommates for 5 weeks, and he got out of work on a Friday. His mom drove him close to the sober living house, and he said, I want to pick up something to eat at this restaurant, and I'll just walk back to the house from here. Hopped on a bus to North Philly, overdosed on Friday night, and died on Sunday.
Oh, man.
And I'm new to this whole sober living thing. I'm then 61 years old, 62, maybe I had had my birthday already at that point, and my roommate just died. And I had been seeing all the differences in him up until that point, and then after that, I saw all the similarities and realized I'm capable of that too. And so that was a very sobering moment. The killer with that whole story was I went to the memorial service and went through the receiving line, and Corey's mom was there. And I said, I was Corey's roommate. And she looked at me and she said, I thought you guys were supposed to watch out for each other. What happened? And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. What the hell do I say to that? I mean, it just blew me away. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm very new to this. I'm really sorry about your loss. And that's all I could say. And so just the reality of the life that, the lifestyle that I've been living, was really hit home that day. Last story is 5 weeks ago, my best friend, same guy, gymnast, guy who got me into the IT world, has a beachfront home. And he said, we're going to be in Ireland for a week. Would you like to use the place? And I was like, yeah. And I figured I'd invite a buddy or two down, and I checked with him about it. He said it was okay. And I couldn't find anybody to go with me to Ocean City and sit in a beachfront house for a week.
John would have gone with you.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
Yeah, right. When I left Doylestown, I thought, okay, I'll go to some meetings down there. I'll be okay by myself. Before I passed Circle Liquors going into Ocean City, I stopped and picked up $120 worth of booze. And there started a binge that went for 8 days. And I spent another $400 over those next few days. I was just drunk the whole time. And I did a Zoom call with my rehab in Los Angeles on the Tuesday. I came home on Thursday. On the Tuesday, and the staff from the rehab, there was two guys, and one was the founder of the program. They did a mini intervention with me over Zoom. They actually had me turn the computer around and empty the bottle of vodka that was on the countertop into the sink. And I did that after I poured myself a glass off to the side. And I knew about a bunch of stuff that was in the fridge that they didn't know about. So I didn't get sober after that intervention, but the next Wednesday night, I stopped drinking so I could drive home on Thursday. I knew I needed to get the hell out of there. So, and then Ron, I have something for you. Although I'm a tech guy, I rarely listen to podcasts or audiobooks ever. That is until I registered for your daily message. And then I learned that driving home was like an audiobook because you would just go and go and go in your message. And I was like, yeah, this is like an audiobook. I get it now. So, and I appreciate that. I listened. I really did. We are the only beings on the planet that get to live two lives in one lifetime. And I am working on that. So, but I'm struggling. I'm now only 18 days sober from that relapse that I told you guys about. And I tell you what, with that, I'm going to just share one more thing. For me, going to meetings is what keeps me sober today. I believe working the steps is what will keep me sober for the rest of my life. Thanks for letting me share.
All right. Thank you so much. All righty. We've come to the part of the meeting where we're going to open up the floor for shares, discussions, and questions. Please try to keep your conversation to 3 minutes. We've got a lot of people here tonight, and that's a good thing, so thank you. If you feel like drinking, or if you've had a drink today, please come see me. and we'll get to, hang out after the meeting and figure it out. So, going to open up the floor. Michael.